Welcome to Fluent English, the podcast where we not only work on improving your English, but also tackle real-life challenges like stress management to help you thrive both mentally and linguistically. Today, we're diving into some practical tips to handle stress while boosting your English fluency. So, whether you're feeling overwhelmed or just looking to take your language skills to the next level, this episode is for you. Let's get started.
So we're taking a deep dive today into stress management and specifically how it relates to learning English.
Yeah.
It's something that I think a lot of people can relate to in some way.
For sure.
And we've got some really interesting sources here that talk about it from a lot of different angles.
Definitely, yeah.
But before we get into the specifics, I wanted to kind of get your take on it first.
Okay, sure.
What are your initial thoughts on the connection between stress and language learning?
Well, I think everyone experiences stress.
Right.
It's a natural human response.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to see how it can impact both your mind and body.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in ways that we might not even realize.
Yeah.
We got some great sources here that explore everything from those immediate physical reactions, like that fight or flight response to long-term effects.
Mm-hmm.
And even how techniques like mindfulness can help.
Yeah, and that's something that really caught my eye too.
Is this idea that English itself can be a stress management tool, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Like learning a new language can be challenging.
Yeah.
So how can it also be a source of calm?
Right. It's all about shifting your perspective, I think. Think of it like this. When you engage with English, you're focusing on something new. You're engaging your mind differently.
Yeah.
This can provide a mental break from your usual stressors.
Interesting.
But before we get too far ahead, I think it's important to unpack what we actually mean by stress in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the sources we've gathered define stress as the body's sort of fight or flight response, and how it's triggered by external things called stressors.
Yeah.
And, it makes you think about our ancestors running from saber-toothed tigers.
It really does.
And things like that.
Yeah, it's a primal response for sure.
But, what's interesting is that while that fight or flight response was designed to help us survive those situations,
right,
our modern stressors are rarely that dramatic.
Right.
Yet our bodies still react in the same way.
Yeah.
Even if we're just facing a deadline at work or stuck in traffic.
Totally.
And, that's kind of where the trouble starts.
So how does this constant state of fight or flight, even those like non-life-threatening situations, how does that actually affect our bodies?
Well, think about what happens when you're stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Your heart rate goes up.
Sure.
Your muscles tense. Your breathing gets shallow.
Yeah.
And basically, this is your body diverting resources away from non-essential functions.
Okay.
Like digestion.
Okay.
And you guessed it, higher level cognitive processes.
Yeah.
Like language learning.
Wow.
So in other words, chronic stress can actually make it harder to learn.
That's a pretty direct link between stress and language learning.
For sure.
I hadn't thought about it that way. And it makes me wonder, are there specific words or phrases that our listeners can use?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
To describe their experience in English.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And having the vocabulary to articulate your feelings can be incredibly empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Several sources highlight phrases like feeling overwhelmed
Yeah.
or under pressure, which are really common experiences, especially when tackling a new language.
Right. Okay, so we've defined stress, and we've talked about its potential impact on language learning.
Yeah.
But, the sources also mention specific types of stress.
Yes, they do.
Can you tell us more about those?
Sure. There are three main types.
Mm-hmm.
Acute stress, episodic acute stress, and chronic stress.
Okay.
Think of acute stress as a sudden short-term burst, like riding a roller coaster.
Okay.
It's intense but passes quickly.
Gotcha.
Episodic acute stress is what happens when you experience those bursts frequently.
Okay.
Maybe you're constantly juggling deadlines or dealing with a series of difficult situations. And then there's chronic stress, which is ongoing and can be caused by long-term problems like job dissatisfaction or relationship issues.
So if acute stress is like a quick sprint, chronic stress is more like a marathon with no finish line in sight.
With no finish line. Yeah. And chronic stress is the real culprit when it comes to negative health outcomes.
Okay.
Both physical and mental.
Yeah.
It can impact everything from your sleep to your immune system to your ability to focus and learn effectively.
So I'm guessing that also makes learning English more of a challenge.
Yeah, if you're already feeling overwhelmed and your mind is constantly racing, it's much harder to absorb new information and make those neural connections that are essential for language acquisition.
Okay, so we know that chronic stress can be a major roadblock to language learning. But before we dive into specific strategies for managing stress, I'm curious about the physical symptoms.
Okay.
The sources mention quite a few. But one that really caught my attention was stress rash.
Oh, yeah.
I had never heard of that.
It's actually more common than people realize.
Really?
Especially in women. It's often misdiagnosed as a simple allergic reaction.
Wow.
But it's actually the body's way of manifesting stress on the skin.
So it's like a physical sign that your stress levels are reaching a boiling point.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's incredible.
It's fascinating.
And a little bit scary, to be honest. Have you ever experienced a stress rash?
I have to admit I haven't personally.
Okay.
But the research on it is fascinating.
Yeah.
It really shows how deeply our minds and bodies are connected.
That's a perfect example of how stress isn't just a feeling.
Right.
It has real physical consequences.
Absolutely.
And for our listeners, it emphasizes why managing stress is so important.
Yes.
Not just for overall well-being, but also for successfully learning English.
Couldn't agree more. And luckily, we have a wealth of strategies and techniques to explore. That's what we'll dive into next. So we've seen how stress can actually put the brakes on learning English.
Yeah.
But the good news is there are tons of stress management techniques out there.
Okay.
One that's gotten a lot of attention
and
is mentioned frequently in these sources is mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Okay. I've heard that word a lot, but I'm not quite sure I fully understand it.
Okay.
What does it actually mean, and how can it help with stress?
Well, at the core, mindfulness is about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Okay.
It's like hitting the pause button on all those racing thoughts and worries and just tuning into what's happening right here, right now.
Okay.
And one of the most effective applications of mindfulness for stress reduction is something called mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR.
MBSR, that sounds pretty intense. Is this something you have to go to like a special retreat for, or can anyone practice it?
It's more accessible than you might think.
Okay.
While there are structured MBSR programs, you can also incorporate its core principles into your daily life.
Okay.
Even during your English studies.
Okay.
One key technique is the body scan.
Okay.
Where you systematically bring your attention to different parts of your body, noticing any sensations without judgment.
So instead of stressing about that tricky grammar rule, I could just focus on feeling my feet on the ground, my breath going in and out. It sounds almost too simple.
It is simple, but it's not always easy.
Okay.
You know, it's about training your mind to shift focus from those internal anxieties to your physical presence in the moment.
Okay.
And the research on MBSR is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
It's been shown to reduce anxiety, improve sleep, and even boost your immune system.
That's impressive. And I can see how those benefits would directly translate to better focus and mental clarity for language learning.
For sure.
Are there other more practical tips for managing stress?
Sure.
That we can use in our daily lives, maybe even specifically while we're studying English?
Absolutely. One source highlighted the importance of building brain breaks into your study routine.
Okay.
It's easy to get so absorbed in learning that we forget to give our minds a rest.
Yeah.
But those short breaks can actually make you more productive in the long run.
Okay, so instead of powering through hours of vocabulary drills, I should step away from the books every now and then.
Exactly.
What kind of things would you suggest doing during a brain break?
Anything that helps you detach from your studies and recharge.
Okay.
It could be as simple as closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths, listening to a favorite song, maybe in English.
Okay.
Or even stepping outside for a quick walk.
I love that idea. It's almost like tricking your brain into thinking you're not studying, even though you're still incorporating English in a fun and relaxing way.
Exactly.
And speaking of fun, one of the sources talked about the power of laughter as a stress reliever.
Oh, yeah?
Is there any science behind that?
It might sound too good to be true. But laughter really does have physiological benefits.
Okay.
It can lower cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and release endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects.
Okay.
Plus, it just feels good.
Yeah, it's like an instant mood reset.
Exactly.
And the best part is it's free and accessible to everyone.
Absolutely. And you can easily incorporate laughter into your English practice.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, you can watch a funny English language movie or TV show,
Mm-hmm.
listen to a comedian,
Okay.
or even just spend time with friends who make you laugh.
So it's not just about grammar drills and vocabulary lists.
Right.
Learning English can actually be fun and stress relieving.
Exactly.
That's a great message for our listeners.
It is.
But what about those times when we feel overwhelmed and just can't seem to shake the stress?
Yeah.
What strategies would you recommend for those moments?
One technique that came up in a few sources is keeping a stress journal.
Okay.
It's a great way to identify those triggers that tend to send your stress levels soaring.
So it's like becoming a detective of your own stress.
Exactly.
You're tracking the patterns, figuring out what sets you off.
Exactly. And once you know your triggers, you can start to develop coping strategies that are tailored to your specific needs.
Okay.
Maybe you realize that certain times of day are more stressful, or that certain tasks tend to trigger anxiety.
Okay.
Armed with that knowledge, you can start to make adjustments and proactively manage your stress.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like creating a personalized stress management plan.
Exactly.
But what about those times when it feels like everything is piling up and you just want to say yes to everyone and everything to avoid disappointing people?
The people-pleasing trap.
Yeah.
This is where setting boundaries comes in.
Okay.
Learning to say no is crucial for protecting your time and energy,
Right.
especially when you're already feeling stressed.
I can definitely relate to that. It's so easy to overcommit, especially when you want to be helpful and supportive.
Right.
But ultimately, if you spread yourself too thin, you're not going to be able to show up fully for yourself or anyone else.
Exactly. Saying no isn't selfish.
Right.
It's a form of self-care.
Okay.
And it can be incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup.
That's a great analogy.
It is.
And speaking of self-care, it seems like there's a strong link between taking care of yourself and managing stress effectively.
Absolutely.
What are some self-care practices that you find particularly helpful?
It really depends on what brings you joy and helps you recharge.
Okay.
For some people, it might be spending time in nature, reading a good book, or taking a long bath. For others, it might be exercising, listening to music, or pursuing a creative hobby.
And I imagine for our listener, self-care could even involve incorporating English in a relaxing way.
Absolutely.
It could be reading a favorite English novel, listening to a soothing podcast, or even just journaling in English about your day.
Those are all great ideas.
Okay.
The key is to find those activities that nourish your mind, body, and soul.
Yeah.
And that help you feel more grounded and centered.
And speaking of grounding and centering, one of the sources mentioned a technique called grounding, which is supposed to be helpful for managing anxiety in the moment.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Grounding is a set of techniques that help you connect with the present moment and calm your nervous system. It's particularly helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious.
Okay.
One simple grounding technique is the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. What is the 5-4-3-2-1 method?
It's all about engaging your senses.
Okay.
You start by noticing 5 things you can see.
Okay.
Then 4 things you can touch. 3 things you can hear.
Okay.
2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste.
Wow.
This helps to shift your attention away from racing thoughts and bring you back to the present moment.
So it's like a mental reset button.
Right.
You're anchoring yourself to the here and now.
You got it. And you can even incorporate this technique into your English practice.
Oh, okay.
For example, you could focus on 5 English words you see on a page, 4 English sounds you hear in a song, and so on.
That's a fun way to combine mindfulness and language learning.
It is.
I love that. It's like a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
You're calming your mind and improving your English at the same time.
It's all about finding those win-win situations that make learning enjoyable and sustainable.
And speaking of sustainable, one of the things that stood out to me in the sources was that stress management isn't just about individual techniques.
Right.
It's also about seeking support when you need it.
Yeah.
There's no shame in reaching out for help, right?
Absolutely not. Sometimes we need a little extra support to navigate those challenging times. It could be talking to a friend, family member, therapist, or even joining a support group.
It's like that saying, it takes a village.
Exactly.
We don't have to go through this alone.
We don't.
And remember, there are professionals who are trained to help you develop coping mechanisms and manage stress effectively.
Yeah.
And speaking of professionals, one of the sources mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, yeah. CBT.
Or CBT. as a proven method for managing stress and anxiety.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how CBT works?
Sure. CBT is a type of therapy that focuses on identifying and changing negative thought patterns that contribute to stress and anxiety.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those automatic negative thoughts that pop into our heads and challenging them with more realistic and balanced perspectives.
So it's like rewiring your brain to respond to stressful situations.
Exactly.
In a more positive and constructive way.
That's a great way to put it. CBT equips you with tools and techniques that you can use long after therapy has ended to manage stress and maintain your well-being.
That's really empowering. It's like giving yourself a toolkit for navigating life's inevitable ups and downs.
It is. And remember, seeking professional help doesn't mean you're weak or broken.
Right.
It means you're taking proactive steps to care for your mental health.
It's like going to the doctor when you have a physical ailment.
Exactly.
There's no shame in seeking expert guidance and support.
And it can make a world of difference in your overall well-being.
Yeah.
And ultimately in your ability to learn and grow.
Okay, so we've covered a wide range of strategies, from mindfulness techniques to practical tips to seeking support.
Yeah.
It seems like stress management is truly a multifaceted approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about addressing stress on multiple levels: physical, mental, emotional, and even social.
Yeah.
And it's about finding what works best for you.
Right.
And incorporating those strategies into your daily routine.
And I think it's important to remember that stress management is a journey, not a destination. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
It's about experimenting, finding what works.
Right.
Yeah.
And being kind to yourself along the way.
Beautifully said. And speaking of kindness, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And talk about the unique challenges that our listener is facing in their English learning journey.
Okay.
We've talked about how English can be a stress reliever.
Yeah.
But it can also be a source of stress in itself, right?
Absolutely. Especially when you're first starting out, feeling overwhelmed by all the new information.
Yeah.
It's like being dropped in a foreign country where you don't speak the language.
Right.
It can be intimidating, even scary at times.
It's completely normal to feel that way.
Yeah.
Learning a new language is a challenging process, and it's natural to feel stressed at times.
Right.
But remember, you're not alone.
Okay.
Countless people have gone through this journey before you, and they've come out the other side fluent and confident.
And I think it's important to remember that language learning is a process of continuous growth. There's always something new to learn, always room for improvement.
It's about embracing the journey and finding joy in the process.
Exactly. And it's about being kind to yourself along the way.
Yeah.
Don't get discouraged by mistakes or setbacks. They're a natural part of the learning process.
Sure.
Celebrate your progress, no matter how small it may seem.
And remember, the goal isn't to become perfect overnight.
Right.
It's to communicate, connect, and express yourself.
Yeah.
That's where the real magic of language lies.
Beautifully put. And that's where the stress-relieving aspects of English come in.
Okay.
It's about finding ways to make the learning process enjoyable, engaging, and even relaxing.
One source mentioned using English language music as a way to de-stress and improve listening skills at the same time.
That's a great idea.
It's like turning your study time into a mini concert.
I love that. And it's a great way to immerse yourself in the language and culture.
Yeah.
Music can be such a powerful tool for learning and relaxation.
Another suggestion I saw was watching English language movies or TV shows with subtitles. It's a fun way to pick up new vocabulary and idioms.
Yeah.
And it can also be a great way to unwind after a long day.
Absolutely. And there's something for everyone, from comedies to dramas to documentaries.
Yeah.
You can choose shows or movies that align with your interests and make the learning process feel more personalized.
And the great thing about watching with subtitles is that you can always pause and rewind if you miss something. It's like having a built-in language tutor.
It is. It's a fantastic way to learn at your own pace and make the experience more enjoyable.
So even though learning English can be challenging at times, it can also be a source of relaxation, enjoyment, and even stress relief.
Yeah.
It's all about finding the right approach for you.
Exactly. And remember, the more you engage with the language, the more confident and fluent you'll become.
Right.
It's a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's shift gears and talk about another important aspect of stress management that's specifically relevant to language learning: setting realistic goals.
Yes, that's so important.
This is something that came up in a few of the sources.
They did.
And I think it's crucial for staying motivated and avoiding burnout.
Absolutely. When it comes to language learning,
Yeah.
it's so easy to get caught up in the idea of fluency
Right.
and feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the task.
Right.
Setting unrealistic goals can set you up for disappointment
Yeah.
and make the process feel much more daunting than it needs to be.
It's like trying to climb Mount Everest without any training or preparation.
Right.
You're bound to get discouraged and want to give up.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to break down the learning process into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on becoming fluent overnight,
Right.
set realistic goals that you could achieve within a specific time frame.
One source mentioned the SMART goal-setting framework,
Yeah.
which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Yes. It's a great way to ensure that your goals are well-defined and attainable.
I love that framework. Let's break it down a bit.
Yep.
Specific means clearly defining what you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Measurable means having a way to track your progress.
Right.
Achievable means setting goals that are challenging but realistic.
Uh-huh.
Relevant means choosing goals that align with your overall language learning objectives.
Yeah.
And time-bound means setting deadlines to keep yourself accountable.
Exactly.
So instead of saying, I want to be fluent in English,
Right.
a SMART goal might be, I want to be able to hold a basic conversation in English about my hobbies and interests within 3 months.
Exactly. That's a much more specific, measurable, and achievable goal.
Okay.
And as you achieve these smaller goals,
Yeah.
you'll build momentum and gain confidence,
Mm-hmm.
which will propel you forward on your language learning journey.
It's like building a house brick by brick.
Exactly.
Each small step brings you closer to your ultimate goal.
And the process itself becomes more enjoyable and less stressful.
Yeah.
When you're not constantly focused on the end destination,
Right.
it's about savoring the journey and celebrating the small victories along the way.
And those small victories can be incredibly motivating.
They are.
They remind you that you're making progress.
Yes.
And they give you the fuel to keep going.
Absolutely. It's like giving yourself a pat on the back for all your hard work and dedication.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's keep this idea of setting realistic goals in mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crucial part of managing stress
Yes.
and staying motivated on your English learning journey.
for sure.
Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Ah.
And it's about finding joy in the process.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And as we continue our exploration,
Yeah.
we'll delve into some more specific techniques and strategies
Yeah.
for incorporating stress management into your daily English practice.
Great.
Stay tuned.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about the science of stress, the different type, and a whole range of techniques for managing it, especially as it relates to learning English.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to get even more practical.
Okay.
What are some specific things our listener can do, like right now, to weave stress management into their English learning routine?
Well, one technique that really stood out to me in these sources is this idea of mindful reading.
Mindful reading, okay.
Yeah. It's about slowing down,
Okay.
engaging with the text, and really absorbing the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just skimming for information,
Right.
you're savoring the language,
Yeah, okay.
noticing the nuances, and making deeper connections with the words.
So instead of stressing about how many pages I've read,
Right.
I'm focusing on the quality of my reading experience.
exact.
I can see how that can make a big difference in comprehension. Not to mention reducing that feeling of being overwhelmed
Right.
by the sheer volume of material.
It can be really helpful for that. And it's not just about reading, you know.
Oh, okay.
You could apply this mindfulness to other aspects of language learning, like listening.
Okay.
Imagine listening to an English podcast, not just for the content, but really tuning into the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation of the speaker's voice.
Right.
It transforms the experience from passive listening to active engagement.
So it's almost like turning your study session into a mindfulness exercise.
It is.
You're not just learning English, you're also training your mind to be more present and focused.
Exactly. And the research on mindfulness suggests it can actually improve cognitive function, focus, and memory,
Wow.
which are all crucial for language learning.
That's amazing. So mindfulness not only reduces stress, but also boosts our brains.
It does.
But let's be honest, sometimes we just need a break, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I know, I can't focus for hours on end without feeling a little fried.
We all need breaks.
Okay, good. So what kind of things should we be doing during these breaks? Should I just be zoning out on my phone, or are there more productive ways to use this time?
Well, the key is to choose activities that help you detach from your studies and shift your focus. It could be something as simple as closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths, listening to a favorite song, maybe in English,
Okay.
or even just stepping outside for a few minutes to get some fresh air.
I can see how even a few minutes of disconnecting could make a big difference.
It can.
But wouldn't it be better to use those breaks to cram in even more English practice?
You know, it might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but those breaks actually make you more efficient in the long run.
Okay.
When you push yourself too hard without giving your mind a chance to rest,
Right.
you end up with diminishing returns.
Yeah.
You're not absorbing information as effectively,
Okay.
and you're more likely to make mistakes.
So it's like that saying, work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Giving your brain a break actually helps you learn more effectively.
It does. And remember, these brain breaks can also be a great opportunity to incorporate English in a more relaxed and enjoyable way.
Oh, okay.
You know, listen to a podcast while you're walking, watch a funny English language video clip, or even just chat with a friend in English.
I love those ideas. It's all about finding those little moments throughout the day where you can weave English into your life without it feeling like a chore.
That's the goal.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
Yeah.
I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listener feels equipped with some valuable tools and strategies for not only managing stress, but also using it to their advantage on their English learning journey.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure exploring these sources with you.
Likewise.
And to our listener, remember, you've got this. Be kind to yourself. Embrace the challenges and celebrate the victories. You're on your way to becoming a more confident and fluent English speaker.